If you've ever been quietly dismissed by the people whose approval you once craved the most, stay with me. Because what happened that night didn't just change a dinner, it changed everything. And before we get to the moment the room went silent, you need to understand how I ended up at table 11. The night my father raised his glass and called my life's work quaint, I already knew where I stood, literally and metaphorically. Table 11, the far end of the room, closest to the catering exit. No flowers, no thoughtful touches, just a tea light flickering inside a plain glass jar and a printed name card in a standard font, as if effort itself had been rationed. I had known about the seating arrangement for 2 weeks. What I didn't know was how that seat would become the center of everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My family has always been in the business of building things. Not metaphorically, literally. For decades, they designed structures that reshaped skylines and defined reputations. My grandfather started it all with nothing but a drafting table, a T-square, and ambition that outran his circumstances. My father took that foundation and turned it into a respected firm, polished, precise, and profitable. By the time I was old enough to understand what legacy meant, it had already been decided that I would be part of it. There was just one problem: I didn't want to be. At 20, I told my family I wanted to study physical therapy, not architecture, not design, not the family business, just something else, something that mattered to me. The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was heavy enough to change the air in the room. My mother was the first to speak, her voice calm in the way that hides disappointment. What will we tell people? Not why do you want this? Not what excites you about it, just what will we tell people? My father didn't argue. He didn't need to, he just gave it a name. A detour. And somehow, that word stuck harder than any argument ever could. 8 years is a long time to be someone's detour. Long enough to build a life that doesn't fit inside the expectations you left behind. Long enough to realize that approval, once withheld, doesn't quietly return, it calcifies into something colder. I became a licensed physical therapist. My work isn't glamorous. It doesn't photograph well. It doesn't earn invitations to elite dinners or gallery openings. But it matters. I help stroke patients relearn how to hold a cup steady. I guide people through the slow, frustrating process of reclaiming movement after injury. I've watched individuals stand for the first time after months of immobility, and I've watched others decide, day by day, whether continuing is worth the pain. And every time, I try to help them choose yes. My parents call it hands-on work. They always pause slightly before saying it, as if the phrase itself requires careful handling. The moment I stopped waiting for them to understand came quietly. No argument, no confrontation, just clarity. Our rehabilitation center received a statewide recognition, Program of the Year. It wasn't luck. I had led the initiative, coordinated the care model, written the proposal that made it possible. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe they might see me differently. I sent them an invitation, 3 weeks in advance. My father responded the next morning. He had a prior commitment, the kind that couldn't be moved. The next day, I saw a photo of him online, standing proudly at an event celebrating one of my sister's projects. His arm around her, that unmistakable expression of pride, the kind I had stopped expecting. I kept the award letter on my kitchen counter for a month. At first, I looked at it often, then less. Eventually, it became just another piece of paper I walked past without noticing. And somehow, that felt worse. That's around the time I met Callum, and here's where things start to shift. Because he didn't ask me what my work looked like from the outside. He asked me what it felt like. We met at a farmer's market. A casual stop for cider turned into a conversation that lasted nearly an hour. I told him about a patient, a man relearning how to write after a stroke, about how he signed a birthday card for his granddaughter with his own hand for the first time in months. Callum listened like that story mattered, like I mattered. No interruptions, no polite nods, no subtle evaluation, just attention. And if you've never experienced that kind of attention, let me tell you, it's disarming. Callum runs his family's orchard, hundreds of acres, generations of work. He wakes early, works hard, and speaks with the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to prove anything. There were moments, though, small ones, that didn't quite fit the picture. Phone calls he stepped away to take, documents that suggested responsibilities beyond farming, but I didn't push. Because none of it changed the one thing that mattered. He saw me clearly. When my sister's engagement party was announced, I knew exactly what it would be. Elegant, controlled, impeccably curated, and, if I'm being honest, predictable. What I didn't expect was just how precisely my place in that world had been arranged. I overheard it by accident, my mother on the phone, speaking with quiet efficiency. Table 11 is fine for her and her guest. They won't need to be part of the formal introductions. It wasn't said with cruelty. That's what made it worse. It was practical, decided, final. That night I told Callum. He asked if I wanted to skip it. For a moment I considered saying yes, but something inside me needed to see it, clearly, fully, without excuses. "I'll go," I said. "Then I'll be there," he replied, no hesitation. The evening arrived. Everything looked exactly as expected. Soft lighting, carefully arranged decor, conversations that carried just enough volume to signal importance. And then there was table 11, exactly as described. Minimal, peripheral, forgettable. Across the room, the important guests gathered, my parents, my sister, people whose names carried weight. Among them, one man stood out, distinguished, observant, quietly influential. He glanced toward our table more than once. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I should have. Dinner began, conversations flowed. And then came the moment my father always excelled at the toast. He stood, glass raised, commanding attention with practiced ease. He spoke about legacy, about achievement, about my sister. Every word about her was precise, intentional, proud. Then his gaze shifted. To me. "My younger daughter," he began, his tone carefully balanced between affection and dismissal, chose a different path. A pause. Physical therapy, hands-on work. "I'm sure it's rewarding." Polite murmurs, a few quiet chuckles. "And she's brought her partner, who runs an orchard if I'm not mistaken." More laughter. Then, looking directly at me, "Still happy out there?" 60 people turned to watch. And I did something unexpected. I said nothing. I simply continued eating. Then Callum stood, and everything changed. What happened next, no one in that room saw coming. Not my parents, not my sister, not even me. And if you think this story ends with embarrassment, you're not even close. Because the man they dismissed was about to be recognized by the one person in the room whose opinion actually carried weight. And when that recognition landed, it didn't just silence the room. It shattered everything my family thought they understood. Why did one of the most powerful guests at the event suddenly walk across the room, straight to table 11? And what did he say that made my father lose his composure for the first time in his life? And if this story is already hitting close to home, you might want to stay for what comes next. And what he said next didn't just answer that question, it changed the temperature of the entire room. The ambassador didn't hesitate. He walked with purpose, the kind that draws attention without asking for it. Conversations faded mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the staff seemed to slow, as if the air itself had thickened. He stopped at our table. At table 11. "Callum," he said, his voice calm but carrying effortlessly in the silence. "I thought that was you." Callum gave a small nod, as if this were an ordinary encounter. "It's been a while," he replied. That alone would have been enough to shift the mood, but the ambassador wasn't finished. He turned slightly, his gaze moving toward my parents, who were now standing, confusion flickering across their faces. "You know this man?" my father asked, his voice tighter than before. The ambassador's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. The kind of subtle shift that signals a decision has been made. "Know him," he repeated, almost thoughtfully. "Warren, this is Callum Reed." A pause. And then, with deliberate clarity, "He chairs one of the largest private land conservancies in the region. oversees tens of millions in environmental preservation. Multiple counties. Long-term agreements most people in this room will never fully understand. The silence deepened. No one laughed now. No one moved. I've been trying to bring him onto a state advisory panel for 2 years, the ambassador continued. He keeps declining. A faint hint of a smile touched his face as he added, says his work belongs in the field, not in conference rooms. A few people shifted in their seats. The room was recalibrating in real time. And then he said the thing that made my chest tighten, not with fear, but with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Recognition. He's also, the ambassador added, glancing briefly at me, responsible for funding several rural rehabilitation clinics through his foundation's health initiatives. Another pause. I imagine that matters more to some people here than titles ever could. My father opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time in my life, I watched him search for words and fail to find them. Callum didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I didn't come here to make a point, he said calmly. I came because Marin asked me to. Every word landed cleanly, deliberately, and because she is one of the most quietly strong people I know. The room stayed still. She spends her days helping people rebuild their lives after losing parts of themselves most of us take for granted, he continued. She does it without recognition, without applause. And for years, she's done it while being treated like she somehow chose less. No one interrupted. No one dared. Then he looked directly at my father. You had over a year, he said. You never once asked my last name. A beat. That tells me everything about what you value. And just like that, he sat down. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was absolute. The kind that forces people to confront something they'd rather ignore. I stood. Not because I had planned to, but because staying seated suddenly felt impossible. My hands weren't entirely steady, but my voice was. You've been saying it for years, I began, looking at my parents. Not always out loud, but in every decision, every introduction, every moment where I felt like an afterthought. My mother's eyes dropped to the table. I'm not here to argue, I continued. I'm not here to prove anything. A breath. I'm just done fitting myself into a space that was never meant for me. I turned to Callum. We're leaving. No one tried to stop us. No one spoke. 60 people watched as we walked out, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. The consequences didn't come all at once. They never do. They arrive quietly, gradually, and then all at once. 3 days later, my sister called. Her voice was different, stripped of the confidence she usually carried. The wedding's on hold, she said, just like that. No build-up, no explanation at first. Then it came, slowly, carefully. Sebastian, her fiancé, wasn't comfortable moving forward, not after what his father had witnessed, not after what that moment had revealed. Reputation, it turns out, isn't just about success. It's about character. And character, once questioned in the right room, doesn't recover easily. Within a week, things began to shift further. Quietly but unmistakably. Professional relationships cooled. Long-standing connections reconsidered. Opportunities that once felt guaranteed began to disappear. No public scandal, no dramatic fallout, just distance. The kind that says everything without saying anything at all. Then my mother called, not to defend, not to explain, just to ask if I would come over. I asked her a simple question. Do you want to fix this, or do you just want things to go back to how they were? She didn't answer right away. And that silence told me more than anything else could have. But when she finally spoke, there was something different in her voice. Honesty, not perfect, not polished, but real. We've been wrong, she said quietly. That was the first step, not forgiveness, not resolution, just acknowledgement. I agreed to meet them, but on one condition, that we didn't pretend 8 years hadn't happened, that we didn't smooth it over with polite conversations and careful wording, that we actually faced it. The first conversation was difficult. The ones after that, even more so. There were moments of progress, and moments where it felt like nothing had changed at all, but something had, me, because I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for approval, not for recognition, not for someone else to decide my worth. One evening, after one of those long conversations, I sat in my car for a few minutes before going inside. And for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar. Lightness, not victory, not validation, just space. Like a window had been opened in a room I didn't realize had been suffocating me. When I walked in, Callum was at the table, reading something as usual. He looked up, didn't ask a dozen questions, didn't push, just waited. "I think I'm okay," I said. He nodded once, like that was enough. And maybe that's the part no one tells you. Closure doesn't always come with dramatic endings. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the moment you realize you don't need something anymore. My sister is figuring things out in her own way now, separating what she wants from what was expected of her. I don't know where that path will lead her, but at least now, it's hers. As for me, I stopped trying to explain my life to people who had already decided what it was worth. And in doing that, I finally understood something I wish I had known years earlier. The people who truly see you don't need a resume. They don't need proof. They just see you. So let me leave you with this. Have you ever underestimated someone? Or worse, has someone quietly underestimated you, while you kept proving your worth in ways they never bothered to notice? Because sometimes, the person sitting at table 11 is the one who changes the entire room. And if this story made you think, even for a moment, about the way value is judged, dismissed, or misunderstood, then you already know why it matters. Stay curious, and never let someone else decide what your life is worth. And subscribe to our channel for more videos like these.